My final project is about the influences of Csikszentmihalyi's flow on the enjoyment of piano practice and performance. First of all, I want to use a short video to briefly introduce Csikszentmihalyi's flow theory.
Csikszentmihalyi describes flow as the state in which people are so involved in an activity that nothing else seems to matter. He goes on to say that concentration is so intense that there is no attention left over to think about anything irrelevant or to worry about problems. Self-consciousness disappears and the sense of time becomes distorted.
We've probably all experienced this before, and it's absolutely one of the best feelings in the world. I remember 4 years ago when I was not a piano major and I was very stressed with the research and writing of my thesis for my degree. I usually went to the practice room to play my favorite classical music and Chinese music during the weekend. I was always so focused on what I was playing without thinking about anything else, such as my research, exams, and writings. One day my friend called me for afternoon coffee and I realized that I've been practicing for 5 or more hours without having lunch or thinking about anything else. But I had no idea that several hours already passed by because the only thing I focused on was the enjoyment of playing the piano at that moment. In general, people who experience flow have usually chosen to take part in the activity for the simple love of doing it. People are intrinsically motivated to do it. Flow can be best described in gymnastics, sports, and games. When in flow, athletes are fully focused on what they're doing and perform to the best of their ability. The athletes are able to ignore all the pressures and let their body deliver the performance that has been learned so well. When playing the video games, people are so focused on passing through every level of the game. They're even more motivated whenever they fail the current level, because they've experienced the success and happiness of passing the first several levels. Many people can play video games for hours and lose track of time. When we are in flow, we are at our best. Being in flow while practicing has additional benefits, in that motivation to practice will increase. This phenomenon is referred to by flow researchers as emergent motivation. The emergent motivation associated with the flow experience fosters the development of the skills. As your skills increase, so will the challenges that you will be ready and willing to take on. A mutually reinforcing cycle thus develops, in which enjoyment leads to the enhanced attention, which leads to the growth in personal skills, which leads to the further enjoyment. Before I demonstrate how flow can influence the piano practice and performance, I want to take a moment to explain the flow diagram. Here is the short video of the flow diagram.
So, if we look at the flow diagram, here's how you put yourself in the state of flow. You don't want what you're doing to be too challenging, otherwise you'll have anxiety. You don't want what you're doing to be too easy for your skills either, otherwise you'll be bored. But it's when you balance these two that you end up in the flow channel. You're striving towards the upper right corner constantly. You increase your challenge, you get better. You get better, you increase your challenge. And the more you move toward that direction, the more intense the state of flow gets. So this is not really a how-to book, but our goal should be to find what it is that we love and then keep getting better at it and keep making it more challenging. Or in other words, the main goal is to spend as much of your life as you possibly can in the state of flow, because that is where you find this unbelievable ecstasy.
Thomas Parente explained how to relate the piano practice to the 7 characteristics of the flow theory in his book, The Positive Pianist: How Flow Can Bring Passion to Practice and Performance. In the next several short videos, I will demonstrate how I use the idea of flow in my practice to make it a sheer joy, especially how the flow theory influenced me when I had struggles in my practice. When I was in the process of memorizing Rachmaninoff's preludes in F-sharp minor and in E-flat major, I was struggling with memorizing the left-hand part. In F-sharp minor prelude, the subtle changes of the notes on the left-hand part make it a little confused to memorize the similarities and differences in between the measures. In E-flat major prelude, the left-hand part is all about the counterpoint melody, which is tricky to play and memorize as well. I mainly used these three characteristics in the flow theory to conquer the problem. First, I challenged myself by playing the left-hand part alone as fast as I could without looking at the music. This was after I had 80 to 90% memory of the entire piece. This was neither too challenging nor too easy at that point. It was right in the flow channel. My goal was very clear. I wanted to secure the left-hand notes. Additionally, this challenge was manageable and solvable from both a technical and an expressive standpoint, so I would never feel about to lose control. It took me a while to get to the fluency that I just played. However, this process was very enjoyable, and I could easily lose track of time by doing it. The next example I'm going to show is about body relaxation. When I first learned Rachmaninoff prelude in G minor, my hands and body were really intense. I tended to grab the keys while playing this piece, just like this. Then I learned that this whole piece is not about being intense. I learned to trust my body, especially my arm, to do all the work to make it relaxed and flexible. The characteristics of the flow theory I used here are first, action and awareness merge. When I was doing it in this G minor prelude, there was a feeling that the doing and the thinking were a single activity. Second, I had no fear of playing the wrong notes or losing control because I knew that it was manageable technically for me. My self-consciousness disappeared as I practiced this way. I was conscious only of the action that I was doing, which was trusting my arm to do the work. My goal was to play the third line of this piece as free as I could. This was not too challenging because I already learned the notes. The next example I'm going to show is from Haydn's Sonata in E-flat major. There's one passage in this piece where the left hand has all the tricky notes. It's like counterpoint melody. The challenge I gave myself was to play every note bigger. Here is how I did it in the practice room. This was not too challenging for me at that moment because I already learned the notes. However, since the left hand is not very good at doing these tricky melodies, especially memorizing these melodies, playing bigger can help make the left hand feel more comfortable and confident. Also, by doing this, you will gradually feel so satisfying since your left hand becomes more comfortable and confident. This is definitely in the flow channel because it's easier for you to lose track of the time by doing this in the practice room. The next two examples I'm going to show are from Debussy's Five-Finger Etude. The way I was practicing it for joy in the practice room was to use Impressionism paintings to inspire my imagination in the music. In the video, my camera was facing those paintings because I wanted to show them. However, in my actual practice, I was facing those paintings all the time while my hands are moving around on the piano. To me, this is one of the best ways for me to practice in the flow channel, because by looking at those paintings, you easily lose your track of time, and you are easily engaged in this situation where you're looking at the paintings and you're playing on the piano, and suddenly you're just in that flow channel. The next example is from Chopin's Polonaise in A-flat major. This passage is very similar to that in Rachmaninoff's G minor prelude, where I have to use my arm or trust my arm to do all the work. So in this passage, I was playing bigger in the practice room, and also I was trying to free my arm as much as I could. The last example I'm going to show is also from Rachmaninoff's G minor prelude. The challenge I always give myself in the practice room is to try different ways for the same passage. This is usually helpful for me to be in that flow channel because I was always curious about how many ways I can play for the same passage, how many interpretations I can bring for the same passage. Sometimes even 4 or 5 notes in the same measure or several chords in the same measure, you can do different things on them. And the more ways you're going to try to play those passages, and the more addicted you'll be in this process. And by recording yourself in the practice room and listening to your recordings several times and compare the different ways that you're doing on the same passage or the same measure, you will be more critical about what you're doing, and you'll be able to figure out what is the way that you want the passage to be sounded like. Once you are addicted to this process, it's easier for you to lose track of the time in the practice room, and you feel so satisfying and you feel so enjoyable because you are figuring out the most artistic way in the practice room. So here is how I tried out different ways for the 6 bars that I showed on the screen, especially those spots that I circled with the red color. Love what you do and do what you love. Flow brings sheer joy and possibilities to everyone's life. In music, flow makes us a greater musician.